4 pieces of evidence that prove God's existence without using the Bible.
Prove God's existence? Finally, someone did it. All right, I gotta see this.
Point number 1. All creation is evidence of a creator with an intelligent mind.
Oh man, I got excited for nothing. Your first piece of evidence is not even evidence, but instead it's just an argument. All right, let's hear it.
For example, whenever you see a house, you see evidence of a builder, and whenever you see the words on a book, you see evidence of an author, as a house cannot build itself and a book cannot write itself.
Yes, we know a house cannot book itself on a beach with a watchmaker and look, the point is not that things make themselves. The point is that when you have background knowledge about how something is made, then you will know how they're made. If you know what a house is and you have background knowledge on how they're made, then you'll know that there is a builder. If you have background knowledge on what a book is, then you'll know that there's an author. If you know what a watch is and how they're made, you'll know that there's a watchmaker. You're not really making the point that you think you are.
And none of that happens by chance or by accident as a result of chaos, as it takes some sort of intelligent mind to create those things with order and design. And this applies to our universe too. The order and design of the cosmos is evidence of some sort of intelligent mind, and it points to the fact that there is a God who is responsible for the creation of our universe.
What you have predictably failed to understand is that you can get what you might think of as order from a state that you might consider to be chaos. Order is just basically a recognizable, like, uniform arrangement or a recognizable function. That's basically all that we call order. If we think of something as being ordered, that is what we're using that word to mean in this context. But you can get that from a state that you might consider to be chaos as long as there are some basic constraints, like the laws of physics, for example, which is why we get snowflakes. The laws of physics act on water and cause it to be arranged in certain ways, and so every snowflake that you see will have 6 points. Just like crystals, if you see something like a ruby or a sapphire or a diamond, you will see a crystalline structure that is caused by the laws of physics acting on naturally occurring material. And the other point you have about design is just assumed. You're supposed to be showing or demonstrating that there is design. You're just assuming that there's design because you see something that you call order, something that you think of as order, and you just assume, therefore, that it must be designed, but that's what you're supposed to be proving in the first place. So this argument fails directly on its face.
Point number 2. Everything with a beginning has a cause. The Big Bang Theory suggests that our universe has a beginning, but however, something cannot come from nothing, so because the universe has a beginning, it also has a cause. Things don't happen because they just do. It's intellectually dishonest to claim something like that. As like I said, it has to have a cause if it has a beginning. And there are no infinite number of causes that go back in time, so there has to be an original uncaused cause when it comes to the creation of our universe. And the best example of an uncaused cause is God. Well, if God created everything, then who created God? Well, God is eternal, so he does not have a beginning or a cause, so he couldn't have been created.
Okay, so this is sort of a sloppy amalgamation of the Kalam cosmological argument along with the uncaused cause argument. Unfortunately, there's a huge problem here, which is that the Big Bang does not suggest or imply that there was an ultimate beginning to our universe out of nothing. That's not part of the Big Bang, even though you think it is. It's just not. And there was recently a survey of physicists that cleared that up for those people who were not clear on it. But in any case, you can't even say that there's a problem with infinite regress of time because you can't really have before time to begin with. The word before implies time anyway. So there is no problem with an infinite regress of time. And anyway, you were just plugging your God into that little gap that you think needs to be filled. And you said that the best example of an uncaused cause is God, but you can't use that as an example until you prove that God is real, and then you can say maybe this God that we know is real is a potential explanation. But you haven't demonstrated that. That's what you're trying to do in the first place, and your argument here fails as well, unfortunately.
Anyways, point number 3. Life comes from life. You cannot get life from inanimate objects. For example, the cell theory states that cells are the basic unit of life and that all organisms are comprised of cells and cells come from pre-existing cells. So if cells come from pre-existing cells and cells are the basic unit of life, then that points to the evidence that life comes from life. It does not come from non-life, as a non-living thing cannot give birth to a living thing. And the fact that life comes from life points to the fact that God is the ultimate source of life, as he is the one who gives us life.
Okay, now this is how you can tell that someone does not understand biology, because cell theory has a couple of notable exceptions, like viruses, for example, which are not cells and are not made up of cells, but by some definitions and in some ways are considered to be alive. Also, the first cell that ever existed did not come from a different cell. It came from self-replicating organic compounds. That's literally how they were made. And of course, this does get into the complicated scientific field of abiogenesis, which I will not get into here, nor am I really qualified to. You can look that up on your own time. And you don't really take cell theory seriously to begin with either, because you think God is alive and you don't think that God is made up of cells either. So once again, this did not work.
My fourth and final piece of evidence is that the universe is finely tuned to sustain life. If the constants of nature were different, then life as we know it could not exist. So factors like gravity and electromagnetism are finely tuned to meet the needs for life to exist. And this is highly unlikely to happen by chance, so it points to the evidence of a designer who knows which conditions are just right and best for us in order for life to emerge.
The fine-tuning argument. Okay, it's not the worst argument for God, I gotta say, but when you start to think through it a little bit, some problems emerge. For example, the vast majority of the universe, almost the entire universe, is completely inhospitable to life, which you would not expect in a system that you think is finely tuned by a God for life. Also, the laws of physics as they are and the fundamental forces as they are, we don't even know that they could be different. We have no evidence at all to suggest that gravity and the electromagnetic force and the strong and weak nuclear interactions could be different at all. We have no evidence at all to suggest that. And if they were different, maybe life still could evolve or develop in some way, but just life like ours wouldn't be able to develop. But the worst part of the fine-tuning argument is the fact that if you had a God that could do anything, you don't need to be fine-tuned. You don't need the universe to be finely tuned at all. Literally, God could use anything and have the laws of physics not work in any situation at all and just sustain life anyway. So the fine-tuning argument is unfortunately another failure as an argument for God.
So those are the 4 pieces of evidence I have for the existence of God that do not come from the Bible. However, the purpose of believing in God is not about how much proof or evidence you have of him. It's about how much faith and trust you put in him.
And here we have the sad conclusion. If the evidence is no good, just believe anyway. Well, no thanks. First of all, I can't make myself believe in God even if I wanted to. You believe things that you are convinced of. If you are convinced that something is true, you believe it. That's literally what that does. So you can't just believe anyway. But even if I could, I don't think I would want to. I'm much more interested in believing things that are actually true. And if you want to see any more of my content, please follow me, Daniel Della Noche, on YouTube and on TikTok. Thank you very much.